Also hitting the record button, so fair warning, this is all being recorded. And we are live.
That was a lot faster. Well done. Welcome, everyone. I'm calling this meeting to order for the April 8th meeting of the Salem Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. Well, I hope everyone's doing really well on a sunny afternoon. Let's jump right in with our roll call. Mickey Varney.
Here.
Alan Alexander. Alan, are you, I think you were muted there. I want to make sure your audio is working. This is always a nice sound check for us too.
Yes, I'm here.
Wonderful, thank you. Tony Cato.
Present.
Woody Dukes.
Here.
Dave Freidenmaker.
Present.
Keith Norris.
I'm here.
Paul Rice.
Here.
And our newest member, Rick Hartwig.
I'm here.
Rick, we're so happy to have you. It's wonderful to be full force up to a voting board of 9 again. I'd love for you just to start us off by introducing yourself real fast and let us know a little bit about your background. And I know you shared some when there was just a couple of us in the room, but I'd love to share more.
I am a retired or recovering middle school choir director. And when I retired, I decided that to do a lot of volunteer work, which I have done. And some of those areas have kind of wound down. And so I'm just looking for more opportunities to make Salem more livable and open and opportunities for the entire population. I am also on the Citizen Advisory Committee for Chariots, and there might be some crossover, which I would encourage. I do have about a 40-year relationship with Woodman C Park, which is kind of interesting. I play tennis there a couple times a week, weather permitting. We have seen that those courts deteriorate. The cracks are getting so big. We've tried to keep them up. We've actually had a weed whacker in there and tried to kill the weeds in the cracks on the court, let alone the weeds around the periphery. But I was involved with City Park and Rec youth basketball as a coach for quite a few years. So this is, an area that I have interest in. I'm also a dog lover. I love the dog park at Minto Brown. It's the best dog park I have ever seen anywhere, and I would fight to the end to preserve that park. And also use Woodman in that realm too. But I'm here to do what I can for livability in Salem.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. And does anyone have any questions for Rick as we get to know him?
I have a dog and a wife.
What kind of dog do you have?
I've probably seen you at the dog park, but we haven't been formally introduced. So I'm out there about every day.
Yeah, we do rescue dogs, and my dog is, she's really old right now, so we don't get out there very often. She's kind of on her last legs, literally. But Woodmansey is a little bit easier for us, a lot closer. But yeah, great. Yeah, we used to have a hoof and woofer group out there at Middle Brown that we'd get together for breakfast and everything. It was fun. Good place for people to get together.
Absolutely. Sometimes Paul's dogs make an appearance in the background if we keep watch. So
yeah, I think
I saw them there when he first logged on.
Yeah,
up and down the stairs.
Yeah. Well, great. Thank you so much, Rick, for being here, and looking forward to all your contributions and learning more as we continue.
Great.
Let's move into our minutes. Hopefully everyone had a chance to review those. Just take a second here, make sure you have them pulled up. And if there's any questions or comments, or I guess more importantly, clarifications or amendments you'd like to make, now would be the time. Yes, Dave.
Under Deer Park draft master plan, about in the middle of the page where it references comments that I made. But I actually, in the second line, I talked about traveling to the park, not through the park. And then the next two paragraphs aren't mine. They look like they're part of my comments, but they're not.
Understood. That was probably in response to what you were saying, is what you're from
Right.
the city.
Yeah,
What you mean?
It kind of appears that I made those comments, but I didn't. I just made that first sentence.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that's a good edit for us to make. So we can add, we can adjust your comments to be to the park, and then add a space and clarify that the response was, and then go into those two paragraphs.
Okay, thank you.
I would be really impressed if you knew the exact width of the path right off the top of your head too. So.
Yeah, it's kind of obvious it wasn't for me.
Any other amendments to the minutes? All right, do we have a motion to approve as amended?
I move that we approve the minutes as amended.
I'll
I
second.
second.
I heard a lot of seconds. I heard Alan first, so we'll go with Alan on this one. And let's just do a voice vote for the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
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 And any opposed? All right, the minutes are adopted. Thank you all. We'll move into our public comment period today. We have just a couple. So Susan, I believe you are, see, there you go. We have Susan Powers, who's going to present, who's going to give us some comment to start, and the floor is yours. Well, you're on mute right now. And I should say, please limit your comments to 5 minutes.
Okay, yeah, it shouldn't, thank you. Well, first, I'd just like to say thank you very much for to all of you for offering your time to join the advisory board, to be part of making Salem parks more friendly and keeping your pulse on them. So I do appreciate that. Today I come to you, I guess it falls under your park, but it is the Pioneer Cemetery. And it is, so I guess it is one of your unique parks within your advisory board. And my concern is the lighting in this cemetery. And I don't know, maybe you could just all raise your hands if you are familiar with this park, or if you know where it's located. Okay, so it's on Commercial and Hoyt. It has one entrance. It is closed from dusk until dawn every day, but every night it has floodlights that light the entire cemetery. And unfortunately, it goes beyond lighting the cemetery, and it floods into our home and our backyard. And I would like to not have that happen anymore. So this is my concern that I come to you with. And I don't know the last time it's been reviewed. You know, they have 5 poles with 4 light fixtures on each of them. Currently, each of them are 400 watts. So that's 1600 watts coming out of each pole. And again, this is for a cemetery that I do realize had one vandalism issue in 1988. And in 1989, these poles were erected and put up to deter further vandalism. So I'm just wondering kind of, you know, at what point do people reassess the need for this amount of lighting? And can it be directed away from my home? That's my comment.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I know we have some of our public works staff here, including Jennifer Keller, who can add some contributions to that. As I know you did reach out to the city earlier, and there's been some movement on this already. So Jennifer, I don't know if you want to give some context on the city side before we open it up to the board.
Thanks, Dylan. So you're correct. We've had several communications with Ms. Powers regarding this issue prior to this meeting, as recently as an email to her today from PGE, indicating that they're going to be going out tomorrow to do an assessment. How that process works, we've done this in several parks. This is not new or unique to Pioneer Cemetery, where we've had issues relative to lighting, or we're wanting to convert the lighting from traditional lighting to LED. So over the last 4 years, we've done several parks and worked collaboratively with PGE in that process. Those are PGE poles within the park. We've shared that information with Ms. Powers as well. And so we legally cannot modify those. We don't own them, and they're addressed through PGE. So the process for that is simply requesting through a work order process with PGE to do that assessment. Again, we meet them on site. We talk about the issues relative to the lightings and how they may be impacting neighbors or whatever the circumstance may be in that particular park. PGE has been very responsive and very collaborative in working with the city and with neighbors in trying to remedy that situation. You know, we need to keep in mind that, again, these are PGE poles and they serve a purpose for them, as well as the lights in the cemetery traditionally were put in for safety reasons and for vandalism. But we recognize over time, you know, some of those needs change and the impact that, like as Ms. Powers indicated, they can have to neighbors. So again, we've modified that through a lot of the parks, whether they be neighborhood, community, or urban parks. We've already made those LED transitions over the past 4 years. That process is actively transpiring with PGE. As I mentioned earlier, we're meeting actually on site with PGE tomorrow on that assessment. They've indicated and written an email to Ms. Powers directly indicating that you know, they understand her concerns. The cities relate to her. We understand her concerns. You know, but there's a process to go through when we don't own them, and we're in the middle of doing that process. You know, it's been a relatively recent request with regard to us bringing this issue to our attention. We've not had any other concerns expressed by neighbors, and so when that concern was originally raised, we did start addressing it. We did have a little bit of a pause because we had the ice storm. And so, you know, Pioneer Cemetery was not in a condition to be able to, you know, kind of facilitate that process. And I will say Pioneer is still not cleaned up. There's still areas that are cautioned off, but nonetheless, it is cleaned up enough that allows us to continue that process. So the city, PGE, we're all actively engaged. We've shared that communication with Ms. Powers as that progress has continued, and will continue to do so.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. That's really helpful. And it's honestly, I'm very impressed that the city and PGE have such a great relationship and that you can respond to things in that manner and have that kind of communication going. And I guess, Susan, does that, I know you did, it sounds like you received some new communication today. And so I just want to give you a chance to respond if there's anything that wasn't covered there.
Yeah, I guess you know, ultimately I want to be assured that the lighting is going to be directed away from my home. And so I just don't know, you know, what those steps will be.
I completely understand your concerns and appreciate you coming and sharing that. And Jennifer, I see you're coming back, but my understanding just from what I'm hearing is that this is being PGE property, really that site visit is the first step for PGE to assess what is out there, and that will take place tomorrow to really get a better sense of what can be done as part of that process. Is that?
And you're correct. And I just want to reinforce is over the 4 years, we have done lots of these with PGE, and we've never had an issue where the neighborhood, PGE, and the city could not come to consensus and rectify the issue. So I'm quite confident that this will not be an exception to that. But certainly that process, that direct process with them is tomorrow. But we found them to be very cooperative and flexible, and in making modifications to our lighting systems. And I believe that the email as well to Ms. Powerstay from PGE recognized that as well, and recognized her concern, and did reference that they were working in a collaborative process, and they were endeavoring to do that as well in this case.
And I want to thank you too for showing up and sharing these concerns. I think that, as Jennifer mentioned, I don't think these concerns had been raised directly before, or at least that we were aware of. And so it's one of those cases where
I have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that we're able to find a resolution this time. And I think that just finding opportunities to bring this up so we can know that there's a process. And it seems like in this case, we have a step moving forward tomorrow. And then from there, it sounds like PGE can hopefully make modifications relatively quickly, as they've done in some other parks.
Great. Thank you very much for listening to my concerns.
Thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you.
We did have written public comments. I want from Aaron, let's see, Donna Thorne, I want to say. And so hopefully everyone had a chance to review that as it relates to the master plan. And I also want to note that Dave, you submitted some written testimony on behalf of the school district. And I didn't know if you wanted to speak to that now as part of public comment, or just wait until we get to the master plan.
We can wait until we talk about the master plan.
Okay. That is.
Dylan, could I ask a question about the lights, or?
Yes. Sorry. Yes, I should have opened that up to the board before.
Yeah, I guess I wanted to clarify. So the poles are owned by PGE, but presumably they are there or were built there on request of the city in 1989. Is that the PGE isn't the one who wants the lights there, or who originally wanted the lights there. Is that a correct interpretation?
Well, yes, that's correct, but they've always been owned by PGE. We're not legally able to make modifications to PGE poles, not necessarily whether it's in a park or not. The same would be for Salem Electric poles. But yes, it was mutually beneficial. PGE wanted them there, and we needed them there for security and vandalism purposes initially.
Is that the same for pretty much any lighting in any park?
It is, and it's also for the safety of, for park patrons as well, especially in the winter, where some things, obviously it gets dark earlier in the evening. And so,
I just meant the ownership situation. Is pretty much any light pole, and I'm not familiar with the particular light poles we're talking about, but is park lighting?
There's three. It depends. There's actually three different types of ownership. There are some poles that are owned by the city. There are some that are owned by PGE, which the majority of them are owned by PGE. And then we have a handful that are owned by Salem Electric. So it just, it depends. But in this particular case, in Pioneer Cemetery, they're owned by PGE.
Okay, thank you.
Alan, I see you have a question.
Yes, can I assume that the city's paying the utility, energy bills for these lights?
We do, and that's part of the reason there's been a focus the last 4 years, 4 years plus since I've been at Parks, is doing conversions to LED. They're more cost efficient, obviously, and so we actually have a cooperative agreement that we do with PGE that they don't charge us for the cost of the replacement. It's actually, we're billed monthly for those costs, that they just extrapolate that cost and add it to the monthly bill, which is beneficial for them and for the city. So that's an agreement that we worked out since I've been at Parks.
Well, I understand this, taxpayers have been paying to convert these lights for some time. I would assume they'd all been converted.
The majority of them have, but I will say the focus to convert those has only been in about the last 4 years since I came out there, quite honestly. So there has been a major push for that to happen, and sometimes that was initiated by us, and sometimes that was initiated by a neighborhood based on the circumstance that was happening in that neighborhood.
Well, it should be an easy switch. If the city is actually paying PG for the service, the city dictates should mandate what PG does about it.
Well, we again, it's a collaborative, cooperative process with PGE. Again, we don't own the poles, so we don't have rights to tell them you have to put this in. But we found, again, over the last several years that it's a very collaborative and cooperative process, and they work very hard to accommodate the needs of all three entities, that being the neighbor, the city, and PGE.
Oh, and I understand. It's just that, the city, if the city's paying the bills, then they ought to have a premier position on telling them how many lights are making the transition into more energy efficient systems.
Well, again, we initiate that then when we do that, but the bottom line is that is PGE, but again, they're very cooperative and collaborative, but they're not our poles. We don't own them.
We understand that completely, but the city is in the driver's position because they're paying the bills.
Well, I don't know that I don't want to kind of go back, but I don't know that they necessarily view that in the same light. So, but again, they're very cooperative with us. So maybe they do, because they're very cooperative and flexible with us as we work through these projects.
Even though they make more money if they keep those 400-watt lights burning all the time, as opposed to the more energy efficient lights.
They've had no issues at all with the conversion process, none whatsoever. They're happy to assist in that process, and they're happy to leave them if it's not our desire or we're not in a position to convert them.
That's all I had.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate that. Those are all good comments. Anyone else? Apologies for rushing through to the next public comment there. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody. Well, let's move into our presentations. And Gretchen, we have you up first.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. Can you hear me okay? Does it sound all right? Yeah. Very good. For those of you I haven't met yet, my name is Gretchen Bennett. I'm on the staff team at the Mayor and City Manager's Office, and glad to be in dialogue with you about the parks as it relates to issues with homelessness. And I have some updates for you, and also thought you might have questions. So if that sounds like a way to proceed, I could offer a bit of information overall and then see what you'd like to talk about. I'll try not to go too detailed in any one thing so we can get to your questions. First of all, an update about Cascades Gateway, and then I thought a quick Wallace, and then a quick overall about Cascades and Wallace combined. We saw an uptick in camping at the south end of Cascades Gateway Park, a little bit creep generally, but then a more significant uptick after the temporary emergency shelter at the Oregon State Fair and Expo Center closed, and then after the warming shelters that were open for the duration of the winter, in particular the State Street Women's Shelter, after it closed, we saw an uptick at the south end of the park there, and learned that there had been significant efforts to look for alternative shelter, and so the folks remaining were having difficulty finding a place that they felt safe. And so we worked actively with community partners this week to try to find a solution there, because we recognized the safety and sheltering issues, but we also had never approved camping at the south end of Cascades Gateway Park, and so wanted a good solution on that. We were excited just today and yesterday to be confirming that the Mid-Willamette Community Action Agency has been able to visit the people at that end of the park and have conversations about their hotel program. They were able to do a temporary increase in their hotel program and speak with the women there who had come out of the women's shelter on State Street and Fairgrounds about options for getting into the hotel program. And those hotel rooms will come open as early as tomorrow is the first day that those spaces become open. So I'm hoping and expecting to see a decrease in the impact at the south end of the park as a result of that new temporary expansion. We also anticipate folks transitioning to the shelter that we're opening activating again at Portland Road, which will have space for 40 in the new pallet shelter project. And there's also vehicle camping there. So we should be seeing improvements to the south end of the park with these new strategies. But of course, continue with our services of the parks team, ensuring that there's potable water and the porta potties, and emptying the garbages from there. Over at Wallace, of course, camping is continuing there, and we've had some recent city efforts to urge campers to be off of the playfields, recognizing the spring is here and soccer and softball and of course disc golf over at Cascades Gateway. So there's been additional signage strategically placed in areas where people are camped in order to help communicate with park users. And also metal signs in both English and Spanish will be posted this week to show designated day recreation areas, in attempting to have clear communications and establishment to back up all of the communication that we're trying to do with folks. We're not implying with those signs anything about intending to stay at the parks. We remain committed to and are planning for the June 1 conclusion. So didn't want anyone to presume that signs going up somehow implied perhaps a longer term commitment. It's just a recognition that we believe it's important to be communicating what is going on with park users so that they can make informed decisions about where they would want to go and where they wouldn't want to go, as they access the park spaces. Also an update about Wallace is today's April 8th. So I believe it was this afternoon today, they went out to Wallace Marine Park and offered vaccinations for COVID-19 to the people who are at Wallace Marine Park. Let's see. I also believe, although we've got people who with more expertise than me on this, I believe that park staff are planning to communicate about what's happening with temporary camping with coaches, as we expect to see more and more use of the parks, or hope to see more and more use of the parks by all of our athletic programs. But overall, again, we're planning on the conclusion of camping at Cascades and Wallace effective June 1st. Identifying additional sheltering options and locations remains the top need and remains my focus, because we believe and know that a successful conclusion, it'll go much more successfully if we have adequate alternative options, and so have been at work on that. So again, another way that's going to help us with that you might have seen in the news is we were delighted. Our region was just awarded $5.5 million in funding, major funding through the Regional Homeless Alliance. And there's funding for several strategies in that, including street outreach, a rapid rehousing program, sheltering dollars. So, and better data. One of the things that I'm hungry for is clearer and better data to really understand the issues. And so I'm pleased that infusion should be helpful and come at a really good time as we're working to conclude camping at Cascades and Wallace. We're also delighted, of course, that the Union Gospel Mission, our largest shelter in Salem, is working on an expansion right now, and we're expecting those beds to be opening this summer and helping a number of people as well. So again, providing options and alternatives. Despite this, though, you all know, I still expect we're going to have challenges. We can't always compel a person to select a choice or take a choice. There's limitations in our ability to really direct and impact ultimately people's decisions and choices. And there remain a significant number of people with particular barriers and particular needs for certain types of shelters that we may or may not have open in time. Those low barrier shelters are really critical. In fact, the Senate passed today the funding for Salem for a low barrier shelter. So that would provide 2 years of operation. So that's another step in the right direction towards expanding the capacity. We're really aiming at not perpetuating seeing our park as a forever home or a sidewalk or a stairwell or any of those things, but really trying to perpetuate and support the kinds of options that can really help progress and a person's goals and help have healthy choices. And so we're just excited about some of the expansions that we think will give us options and help us be successful when we move in with a plan, in the conclusion of camping at the areas. Where I'm also expecting to be working with City Council coming up, and you all and others on a draft matrix. You may have seen in other cities, people have matrices to kind of examine how we choose locations for things like shelters, things like safe park sites, things like managed camps or pallet shelters. And so we're studying the different examples around other cities and what we understand to be evidence-based practices, and are working on kind of a matrix of how you choose locations and what are the factors and the criteria. And so that's something I'm going to want to bring back to you all for your feedback on and input. I think that's probably the remarks that I've prepared. I hope I didn't go through that in too jumbled a fashion, and delighted to hear your questions and talk about anything you're interested in.
Thank you. No, that was great. I really appreciate the thorough overview. I have a couple of questions, but I'll open it up to the board first. Does anyone have any questions they wanted to start with? Paul.
Yeah, considering that I'm more familiar with Wallace because I live over here in West Salem, and I drive by that area and visit the park from time to time. So, but considering the number of people there, it's a very complicated situation, and nobody seems to have the perfect answer for sure. But that's a lot of people that are going to be moving, if you can get them to move out of that area, because it's pretty well established right now. So any thoughts on how effective prohibiting camping in the park will end or will start as of June 1st,
Thousands of thoughts on that. I'm so preoccupied with that. I really hear and understand. About 3 weeks ago, we did get one estimate that there were perhaps 150 tents at Wallace, and that was about 3 weeks ago. So I'm not sure of the accuracy. I think it's a bit of a dynamic, but if that gives you a sense of it. To be honest with you, I think it's really going to vary by the type of person and situation. I think that there's opportunities in some cases for what we call rapid rehousing for folks that are newly becoming unsheltered, and we can work closely with Salem Housing Authority and others and have some success. And I'm hoping with this recent infusion of rapid rehousing resources that we'll have some success there. We do have the increases in shelter beds at the Union Gospel Mission, for example, which will help with a number there. We are talking with our behavioral health partners about how to infuse their expertise. For example, they have change theory, or how did they put it? They have a kind of a theory of change model that can be built into the conversations to help with progress in areas of substance use, for example. And so trying to infuse those principles into conversations is another area that I have hope that maybe a person who may previously hasn't been ready yet to consider detoxification could become ready. So we have some emerging practices. But I'm under no illusion that, there's, hundreds of people, and we have some options and some expanded options, but there will be people who are not, for many reasons, for the trauma in their life, for one reason, we don't have the quite fit, who won't find a place. And I think in that case, it's going to become important for us to say, well, this isn't an option. Wallace and Cascade is not an option. This isn't a place that we can continue to have sheltering. Here are the options that we have. We agree they're not complete or adequate, but this is what we've got. But ultimately, this isn't a choice. So I'm hoping through the positive means and the good strategies and the relationships that quite a few street outreach people have built, that we'll have success with as many as possible. But I'm positive there'll be others that'll just say, well, none of that's for me. And then I don't know where they'll go. We're going to certainly say, well, Wallace and Cascade are not choices.
Alan, I saw your hand up. And we'll go to Rick. Oh,
Alan, you're still muted.
I always appreciate the work that Gretchen does, the good work. And I wish I could be as optimistic as she is about this problem. And it bothers me to no end that some days I think it's getting worse instead of better. And that really upsets me. But last month I was more upset about some acts of violence on the part of campers. And I'm just interested in what the mayor's office is doing to protect both the public, city workers, and other unsheltered who are living in the parks. I was very upset when the person was charged and then released to stay right where he was. You know, that didn't seem, without knowing all the details, that didn't seem like the solution.
Alan, me too, and thank you, and I appreciate that. And I have those days too when you see trends towards increasing homelessness, you know, at a time when we want to be going the other direction. We have a commitment as our region to be built for zero, and I'm excited about the work they do, but there's days when it looks like the numbers are going in the other direction, you know, and we see documentation of that. Well, boy, where to begin on that? I too am often disappointed when we don't have a way for enforcement accountability longer term and to be able to hold someone for some crimes. That's just a personal view, but I know that we have communicated and desire more options when the crime justifies that, to be able to hold someone in a jail for accountability and for public safety. You probably know that the cities don't operate the jails, and those are decisions that are made at the county level. And our advocacy is sometimes effective and sometimes not. They have a pretty clear matrix on what crimes and level of crimes results in incarceration. And some of that too is affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and their needs to keep numbers low, and some of it is budget driven. I know none of us are talking about criminalizing homelessness, but I think what we're talking about is those acts of criminality, the assaults, the abuse situations that get reported where we do want to be able to remove that person and hold them in a jail space instead. We continue to talk with the county about solutions, but yeah, I agree, that's a problem and an open problem. I appreciate Jennifer's leadership and others at Public Works for working closely with our Human Resources Department on specific things that we can do to improve safety. We want everybody who is working at the city, as well as just a park patron, to be able to move through their jobs and their recreation and their relationships with the parks in safe ways. And that includes strategies that range the gambit, as I'm sure all of you know, with the safety and security. There's protocols around going in pairs, communicating through de-escalation, avoiding confrontations, putting your safety above the work, and certainly stepping away as opposed to having staff not go to certain places or not feel responsible to do certain jobs without being accompanied sometimes by law enforcement when that's necessary. We've had law enforcement go with us, for example, on each of the deep cleans that we do at Cascades and Wallace, just to ensure the safety of the clean team that's participated. But I was able to participate in a couple of conversations to examine what kind of information and training and support that we have for folks, and want to continue to do that. I mean, I share the concern, Alan, and certainly agree.
Well, once again, I admire your optimism.
Thank you.
Rick, you had your hand up.
Yeah, with the monies that you're receiving, is there anything allocated to mental health for consulting because it seems, from what I know, besides the drug abuse that many of the homeless have, there's also a lot of mental health problems with them. So is there any of that money that you mentioned going to go to for that purpose?
You know what? I should get back to you on that. I actually don't think so precisely. There's 7 agencies receiving funding through this allocation in the Salem area, 10 overall because it's a regional allocation. But I don't recall any specific organization or project that
Is she getting
is
choppy?
being funded for mental health, or, you know.
Gretchen, we're losing you. Cutting in.
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I feel like our challenges. Oh, that's frozen up.
I think you might be frozen. I'm getting little bits and pieces of what you were saying.
Am I back?
For the most part right now, maybe try talking a little bit more. And I will assume that that is a no then.
Shoot, I'm gonna make some
Perhaps
adjustments to my Wi-Fi.
You could try turning off your
hear me
video
now?
for a moment and then try coming
I
back.
think that the short answer is I don't think there's a specific allocation, but it's also true. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you. In the 5.5 million I listed that's coming into the Homeless Alliance, I don't believe there is a specific coming into the region like the America Recovery Act, and each county will be receiving an allocation, and we'll have to look for ways to enhance mental health. I completely agree with you that it's probably our top challenge. I've heard situation after situation where, did I freeze up again?
It's a little choppy, but I can hear you. I think we can mostly get what you're saying. Is that anyone having trouble understanding the too much? Okay, I think you can.
I'm also going to try to move locations and see if that helps.
Okay.
But I can continue to take questions if you want, if it's not too disruptive or choppy.
Sure, we can try a couple more. Yeah, I think there was one hand up before I ask any. Dave, did you have your hand up? Yeah.
I did. I also had a funding question. I was wondering if any of the funding was targeted to mitigating some of the reasons why people become homeless to start with, to try to keep them in their homes instead of ending up in a situation where they have to find an emergency location to just exist.
Yes, although I am not the best resource on that. I know that there are prevention strategies that the Community Action Agency works on to prevent homelessness, rental assistance dollars, case management and problem-solving solutions to try to assist a person to prevent that from happening. There's a whole series of strategies underway about that. And that's not my exact area of expertise, but I know it's out there, and I could always try to find you some information if you'd like.
Do you know if council's looking at any changes to ordinances or any of the policies of the city that might help in that regard?
I do not, but I can try to find that out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Gretchen, could you clarify, when you say it's a regional initiative, is Portland included in that, or what is the region that we're talking about here?
No, thankfully, because I think this benefited our region. One of the strong steps that our region did recently was form a separate entity, which allowed for funding to come here, as opposed to the way it used to work is that funding would go to what they called the balance of state, and we were mixed in with a much larger area. Instead, Marion and Polk counties were able to be seen as a distinct region for this allocation as a result of the recent work to build the Homeless Alliance. And so the 5.5 million that I'm speaking about is going directly to 10 agencies in Marion and Polk County for, I think, a total of 37 strategies.
That's great. And
yeah.
One other numbers question for you real quick is just to go back to your initial points about the number of beds in June 1st. And so if if June 1st is still the target, but then you were saying that the Union Gospel Mission might not will open in summer, which I know is always, it's hard to pinpoint exact date. Like, do you have a sense of how many beds will be available by June 1st based on the target of what you're looking at versus the number of people in Wallace, just based on rough estimates of 150? And then I don't know if you have one for Cascades, for example.
Yeah, I do not have a Cascades estimate that's any good right now, but I've requested it and hope to have it soon. And you know what, I don't, because we're still in flux with what other sites we're able to open. I can say, for example, that the Portland Road pallet shelter will serve approximately 40 people, as well as the Safe Park sites, but there's quite a waiting list for the Safe Park program, so that remains a challenge as well. But that's 40, and we just observed that Wallace has 167 or 150 tents, for example. So you can see we've got quite the gap. So that's what I'm focused on right now, is looking for other parcels and other strategies where we can close the gap.
Thank you. Mickey, I think you were about to ask a question.
Yeah, I did, and I appreciate the focus on safety. But in addition to our employees, I think of individuals that are visiting our parks or our public spaces. And so my question is, especially after the closure of the women's shelter, what sort of strategies are in place to protect our unsheltered that are more vulnerable, like the women, the families, the children, because they're at risk when they're around individuals that may be a little more violent or aggressive. And so, Gretchen, are there particular strategies in place to help families?
I've been impressed with some of the creative approaches I've seen our nonprofits and also individual advocates do. Yes, I know from the city standpoint, we always encouraging reporting crime to police and taking all of the safety precautions that would be advisable, you know, for all of us, being aware of our surroundings, making selections of places, you know, all of those things. But I've seen nonprofit and individual donors hand out personal safety devices, for example, and things, and talk about location placement of where people choose to be. So I've appreciated that. But yeah, it's something that weighs on my mind too.
Thank you.
And I hope the signs will also just help with communication in the parks, in case someone's newer to our area and isn't aware of the camping, at least in this temporary period before we're closing, that people also would see those signs as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Gretchen, on the signs, is there going to be a public outreach campaign about the signs? Like, I don't know if the city has something on its website, maybe an article in Statesman Journal, just kind of explaining that, like you said, these are temporary, but this is the plan, and just putting them in larger context, because I know sometimes standalone signs don't always tell that full picture or help people understand what is happening.
Thank you. You know, I don't know. I wasn't in all of the conversations about the signs, and so I guess I'm not sure, but I'm going to make a note. That's a good point.
Thank you.
I know I've tried to reach out to some folks and just kind of explain and share the information, folks that might have a specific interest, but that's not as broad as a broader campaign like you're suggesting. Good point.
Seems like something like Statesman Journal is always good for those kind of local stories when we can get those out there, or even side paper. I know Mickey's done a great job of getting some articles in there.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you so much, Gretchen, for spending some time here tonight and really providing some good insight and answering all these questions. As it was said at the beginning, we fully recognize this is a challenging issue, but I appreciate being kept informed about what's happening and being able to share some of our thoughts and concerns with you.
Back at you. I really appreciate this chance to talk, and I'm going to follow up on the prevention side, the ordinance question, the mental health side, and certainly we can stay in touch until I come back and visit.
Wonderful. Patricia, I see you came on. I'm guessing it's for the master plan, but was there anything else on this topic before we move on? Okay, perfect. All right,
Great.
thank you so much.
Everybody, you bet. Bye-bye.
Okay, well, let us move into our master plan, the Woodman C Park master plan. Rick, as you mentioned, you're well acquainted with this park, so perfect first one for you to start with. And Patricia, I will let you kick it off.
Great. Good evening. I'm Patricia Farrell. I'm the Parks and Natural Resources Planning Manager. And tonight we are here to present the Woodman C Draft Master Plan update. You've received a couple of updates previously about the ASR expansion in Woodman C. And that was one of the reasons that we decided that it was a good time to update the master plan because of the expansion of some of the ASR facilities there. The previous master plan was from 2001, and so it was pretty old anyway. And so this was a good opportunity to do the update, bring in the new ASR facilities as well, and kind of reassess people's ideas for what they would like to see in Woodman C Park. We started the process early last year, and we are getting close to the finish line. And we hired Tracy Johnson, a landscape architect from ESA. They are very familiar with our park system. They worked on the Comprehensive Park System Master Plan, Minto Brown Island Park Master Plan Update, and Fairview Park Master Plan. So she's very familiar with our process, and I'm going to turn it over to her, and then I will help answer questions at the end. So Tracy.
Hi, everyone. As Patricia said, my name is Tracy Johnson. I'm a landscape architect with Environmental Science Associates, and I have been working on parks in Salem for many years. And this year we've had the great joy of working on Woodman C and working on an update to a well-loved, I seem to get the well-loved park. So I worked on the Minto Brown Master Plan, and that one was very popular and a very engaged public process. This one has been a little bit different because of the circumstances over the last year, but we've had a pretty good amount of input. So I'm going to probably turn my video off and share screen so that I can share my slideshow with you. So just bear with me for a moment. Stop video, share screen. So we have a little slideshow for you. I'm going to present for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we'll take question and answer after that. So I don't know if any of you, I know one of the board members, the new board member at the beginning of the meeting said that he had realized that he had missed all of the open houses to date on this. But I don't know if anybody else has had the benefit of being involved with any of them. We did reach out to David Friedmaker as part of the school district, who is one of our stakeholders. So he's been involved in the process, I know. But let me just roll through my presentation. So first of all, Woodman C Park is a community park. It's about 30 acres. It's an existing park that, as I said, is well loved and well used. And it's been pretty much in its existing condition for a pretty long time. The last master plan update was in 2001. There have been some improvements, and some of the elements that were in that master plan have been incorporated into the park since that time. But master plans for a park like this normally last for about 10 to 20 years, and at which point you consider it to be time to update that master plan and go back out to the public and see the community has likely changed, desires of what you might want to have in your park have changed. And so it's good to go back regularly to see, what like aspirations we want to maybe reconsider for our parks. And the other factor on this, as Patricia mentioned, is that there have been some ongoing and planned improvements for the future for the aquifer storage and recovery system that resides within the park. And so we wanted to make sure that that work was incorporated into the master plan, so that we were planning to work around it with any improvements that we might want to do in the future. So I guess I kind of already talked through this, but the goals of the master plan were to look at the condition of the existing features, what's out there, what condition is in, consider what things we might want to add to the park, new amenities, either, things that have become popular that maybe didn't even exist 10 or 15 years ago. And also things that just haven't ever been implemented from the prior master plan, reconsider whether those are things we want to have in our park. We also wanted to look at the locations of new features and suitable locations for those. And that ties into the ASR improvements, the existing elements that are going to stay, and also thinking about safety and access and some of the natural amenities that are in this park that are all important considerations as we think about adding new features. So this map is a little perhaps hard to read, but this is an aerial photo. I'm going to increase this in size and see if that's better. Is that better? Can you guys see that better? My dashboard is covering the top, but I'm hoping it's displaying all right for you. So this is an aerial photo of the park that just sort of shows the existing conditions. So, you know, some of the important characteristics of Woodman C is it has Pringle Creek, West Fork Pringle Creek is flowing through the park. And that is kind of a divider. Judson Middle School is to the west, and we have a significant grove of large trees that's occupying the north and west corner of the park, primarily associated with the creek and then west of the creek. And then there's a main driveway, entry drive that comes in from Sunnyside Road, and it serves 3 parking lots that are currently existing within the park. And then within the park, we have an existing tennis court and basketball court, which are both in very poor condition, as was mentioned earlier. We have a playground that is on the older side. It was, I believe, 1998 was when that was built. So, or no, was it 2008? It's getting to be up there in age as well and needs to be considered for renovation. There are also, in addition to the vehicle entrance off of Sunnyside, there are a number of intentional and sort of desire line entrances into the park. So there is an entrance, a pedestrian entrance off of Idlewood that's kind of under this improve entry access label in the top northwest corner. There are dedicated entrances off of Tragan Court and Joseph Court along the south edge that help provide access to both the school and the park. And then people can also walk in from Woodman C Street. And we also, from our stakeholder engagement, understand people are walking through from Avamere and Buttercup, which are to the east of the park. So as we went through the process, we looked at, you know, some of the things that you go through on a master plan process is you look at opportunities and constraints for how you could consider improvements or things to avoid. We looked at access. As I said, there are a number of pedestrian accesses that we wanted to take a closer look at, improving signage or trail conditions, and then the locations of new improvements. So we had a pretty extensive public outreach process and community engagement process for this project. For a park of this size, a community park is intended to serve about a 3-mile radius around the park. And so we sent out a mailer. Tony, who isn't here tonight, gave us the details. I want to say we sent out about 25,000 postcards notifying the neighbors within the vicinity of the project upcoming. There were signs posted in the park. We've had website and Facebook presence talking about the public outreach, opportunities to comment through our different virtual open houses, and also just a general comment line. We also, in addition, we've had, as I mentioned, we've had stakeholder interviews. So at the sort of towards the beginning of the process, we met with a variety of stakeholders that have a particular tie or interest with the park. The school district was one as a neighbor. We met with Avamere and Buttercup, which are neighbors to the east and are impacted by the ASR improvements that are happening because the access road and the development is directly adjacent to their parcels. We also met with the Capital City Disc Golf, which helps partner to maintain the disc golf course that's in the park. And we met with Parks Operations. And I'm forgetting who else we met with. Let's see here. Who else did I miss? I guess, and South Salem Connect. That was the last one that we met with, was South Salem Connect. And we talked about community connections to the park and trail improvements and accessibility improvements. Another key feature of this was we did online open houses for this. And I think you have probably heard the same on Gear. It sounds like you looked at that park relatively recently. They were kind of running on parallel tracks. So we used a similar online open house format to what was used for Gear. And it allowed for displaying of maps and embedded surveys with questions about the content that was being presented. And we also were able to provide that survey in translated Spanish language version as well for people who wanted that. We also had the maps with translated text. And so we were trying to really, with our engagement, make sure that we were reaching, the maximum audience and trying to really get input from as many people as we could. So here are a few statistics on the open house process. So within the framework of the online open house, they consider a session to be when a user opens the site and pages through a number of pages within the online open house. It's kind of set up as you look at one page and then you click next, and then it takes you to the next page and the next page, and it leads you through a presentation. And so for online open house 1, we had about 300 people who engaged in the process, and we had about 132 survey responses. So that was a pretty significant survey response turnout, pretty good. Open house 2, we had more people engage in reviewing the open house, but less survey responses than we had on the first one. And then on the third one, which I'll talk a little bit more about what we presented in each of those open houses in a minute. But for the third open house, we had a little bit less engagement on the sessions and also a little bit fewer responses on the survey. That's pretty normal. We often see when we go through a process, we often have something in the vicinity of 3 to 4 open houses for a project of this size, and usually engagement is high in the beginning, and people want to make sure they're heard in the beginning. And as they get more comfortable with the process, the engagement tends to taper off. So this is pretty normal. And considering we were using the online open house format, this is a pretty good level of results, I would say, and input for the park. So here's a summary of one of the questions that we asked under survey 1. We asked, what are the activities that you like to engage in currently at Woodman C? And the top activities were walking or running or jogging on the trails, disc golf, using the playground, and then the picnic shelter. And so, that pretty much aligns with, if you look at like the state Parks and Recreation, like the state board, when they issue their guidelines on public recreation, those are generally not disc golf, but trails and picnicking and playground are definitely usually in the top categories. So in the first meeting, we asked primarily, what do you do at the park? What kind of things would you like to see in the park? What do you love about the park? And then from that information, we prepared 3 preliminary concepts, which were then presented at the virtual meeting number 2. And so this is the first of those concepts. And this one was definitely sort of the least impactful or least change, I guess you would say, as far as the concepts went. This one included renovation of the tennis court and the basketball and multi-use court, renovation of the existing playground, the addition of some stormwater treatment in the main parking lot, the addition of an additional restroom over near the existing picnic shelter. And then we have some proposed improvements to some of the trails, with more trails being improved to paved and improved to meet accessibility standards for compliance with Americans with Disabilities Act. And then we also have maintained still a large number of soft surface or natural surface trails, which are still, they're a significant presence in the park currently. And we had kind of a split of input from people on whether they wanted more improved, paved, accessible trails and wanted to keep the soft surface trails. So this is sort of the least change from the current condition. We then have concept 2, which is a moderate level of change. You can see we've added, instead of just renovating the tennis courts, we're showing full replacement of the tennis court, basketball court, adding an additional 2 tennis courts to the site, adding additional parking to help support some of these additional features that we've added, because as you add more features to the park, you potentially have the need for more parking. And this also includes renovating the existing parking lot. And one of the ideas behind that was to make it a little bit more efficient, to pull it back from the creek banks a little bit. And also, even though it's a smaller footprint, it gains us a few parking spaces. This also includes the idea of an outdoor classroom along the riverbank that could be used by Buttercup or Judson or other community groups that might want to have some sort of an outdoor gathering space. And it includes an additional picnic shelter adjacent to that. And this one has a little bit different variation on the trail improvements. We have sort of a moderate level of paved trails. So you can see on the prior concept, Idlewood entrance was still a soft surface trail. In this example, we were showing a potential paved access coming in from Idlewood and down into the park. And then the solid lines indicate paved trails, which would be asphalt or concrete, and the dashed lines indicate soft surface or natural surface trails. And this is our third concept. This was the most change version of the park. And so this one was a little bit of a different idea. This was more significant reorganization of the park's features. So this one we considered what happens if we take out some of our driveway and parking lots that are existing and tried to consolidate the parking into one larger parking area and pull it out closer to Sunnyside Road. So you can see in this example, we have the driveway coming in on its usual alignment, but then it splits off and connects to a larger parking lot. And what that does is it frees up space over by the creek so that you can have a nice park experience with a lawn, an improved playground, possibly a splash pad, an additional picnic shelter, and other amenities that are right next to the creek in a really nice natural setting and away from the vehicles and the traffic on the driveway. In addition, on this one, we include replacement and relocation of the tennis courts because they're displaced by the new parking lot, and the addition of potentially a futsal court, which is a court-based version of soccer over near the existing multi-use soccer field. And we also have the addition of a restroom and a shelter near the soccer field. This one also, we embraced the paved trails even more. And so on this concept, we have several paved loops so that people could walk on a variety of paths and loops that were accessible. And then we still have continued to maintain the soft surface trails in the northern and western portion of the site in the more natural areas. So from these three concepts, we presented these at the virtual open house and we presented the differences between them and we asked for input on what people thought. And interestingly, it was a relatively even split, not perfectly even, but it was pretty much a third, and a third between the three concepts. People liked them all pretty well. And then, you know, the question we asked, what are the items that you are most excited or least excited about? And so even, you know, even if you preferred one concept or another, this is another way to sort of look at the data and get input on what people are interested in seeing. And so most excited, people loved the the ideas for the improvements to the trail network. They love the idea of additional picnic shelters. So there's one large shelter currently, but there's a high demand for picnic shelters. And so that was something that people really liked. A number of people really liked the idea of the splash pad. And a lot of people really like the community garden. On the least excited options, additional tennis courts, futsal, volleyball, and splash pad. So you notice, for example, splash pad is on both lists. You either love it or you hate it. So from that, based on the comments we received on the different concepts, and this is just one question of all of the questions we asked in the public input for the survey for this particular open house, we took that information and sort of digested it and used that to create our draft master plan. And so this is the draft master plan that you're seeing here. I believe it should have been included in your packets for today. And what this is this is a blend, as they often are. This is a blend of primarily concepts 1 and 2. And so the concept 3 was very interesting, but it was also the most expensive concept. And so and the most disruptive to the existing park condition. And so we decided to back off from that concept and to sort of combine concepts 1 and 2 together to come up with an alternative for the future. And so some of the elements that this includes, it includes maintaining the existing driveway in off of Sunnyside Road. It maintains the existing parking that's adjacent to the shelter and the parking adjacent to the soccer field. And then it does include the idea of reorganizing the main parking lot, which helps pull it back from the creek and also provides a few more spaces. In addition to that, we've added additional head-in parking spaces along the entry drive that can help support additional users in some of these new facilities or amenities that we're providing in those areas. In addition to the parking improvements, we have an extensive network of trails. It's worth noting that even though there are a lot of trails shown on all of the concepts and on this master plan, particularly in the back natural areas, this is less trails than what is out there currently. So there's quite a network of trails, soft surface trails and desire lines through the natural area, partially due to the disc golf and partially just because it hasn't been as controlled in the past. And so one of the goals of this would be to reorganize the disc golf, reorganize the trail system and try to reduce the number of trails in the natural areas and do some work to restore the natural area, particularly the forested slope in the northwest corner, getting rid of ivy and other invasive species and trying to establish a more native understory. We also still have quite a few paved paths in the park to help improve accessibility and improve pathways into the park and through the park. So we're showing a paved path coming in from Idlewood, coming down the slope and into the park. And then ultimately you could get out to Sunnyside on that paved path. And there also are a couple of paved loops within the park so that you could walk a loop if you wanted to. And you could do that either on paved or soft surface. Other elements that this includes are, we did include a community garden. We included renovation or replacement of the basketball court, replacement of the tennis courts, and the addition of a small multi-use field that could be used for drop-in games or possibly for youth soccer. We have 2 new picnic shelters, one associated with the multi-use field and one associated with a playground. The playground would be renovated to include some more modern features and possibly some nature play and water play features, not a splash pad, but some water play features. And we've also included the concept of the outdoor classroom along the banks of the creek and one additional restroom over in the vicinity of the existing shelter to help provide additional resources, because it's a pretty large park and it's a long way to go to get to the single facility in the center of the park. So I'm going to, and there are a couple of features that are kind of newer to the Salem Park system. And so we've included a couple of photos as examples just to give you an idea of what we might be talking about. The photo on the left here is an outdoor classroom or gathering space. And so that's kind of what we were envisioning. It doesn't have to be anything that's excessively formal, just a place that people could gather, sit, talk, and possibly, do something. We envisioned that maybe there were some science experiments or something that could be happening in the creek. And then on the right, the 2 photos there are examples of some water play features that, they're very popular, incorporated into parks. This wouldn't be the full spray ground, but often what they have is they have some rocks and a concrete chute, and you have a mechanism that provides water. It could be a bubbler or a hand pump that the kids can manipulate, and then they have little gushes of water that go through the system, and they love them. So those are a couple of the features that we're thinking that would be newer to the system that we're thinking about adding. And then here is the summary of results that we got from survey 3, which was related to what do you like about the so survey 3 was correlated with the presentation of the draft master plan, and we asked, what do you like? And then what would your top priority be for improvement? So realizing that we cannot afford to improve everything in phase 1, what would be our first goal? And so the things that were the most popular for renovation on an initial phase would be trail system improvements, natural area restoration, and playground improvements. And one thing that's worth noting is that the tennis court improvements that we're showing on our master plan are already planned to occur and are already funded through other sources. So we did not ask about tennis on this survey because it's like a phase 0. It's going to happen in the nearer term than implementation of the rest of what's in the park master plan. So I think that is... Oh, and the last is the process that we've gone through for the adoption. So the draft master plan was taken to the Fayrite neighborhood earlier in March and to South Salem Connect. And we're here tonight talking to you, and then we're tentatively scheduled to go to City Council in May. And so that's where we are in the process right now to get through the final phases. And I can say, before I open this up for questions, I can say that we have received a few comments, and actually let me clip back to the master plan. So one of the comments we received that was mentioned earlier was the school district requested a couple of revisions to the draft master plan that had previously been issued. One of them was the trail connection we previously were showing a trail connection leaving the park site on the west property line adjacent to Judson, where there's a sewer access easement that crosses the school property. And so we have taken that off and labeled it as a potential trail connection. And that's something that a formal trail connection would need to be negotiated with the school district. And also there is I believe, a foot trail that connects the two access points between Tragan and Joseph in the bottom southwest corner. We pulled that trail onto the park property so that it's not crossing the school district. But with that, that's the end of my presentation. If people would like to, if there are questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you so much. Dave, I want to give you the chance to go first just because you did write that written comment. I know that it's addressed here a little bit, but anything else you wanted to add?
Okay, well, I can address our comments. The school district, because Judson Middle School shares a fairly long border with the park, is interested in this park, of course. I mean, it's not the overall design. I like the design of the park. I like the amenities that have been put into the park, but the school district's concerned about the safety and security of the school site and improving the trail connections, paving the trail connections, and then more or less encouraging the public to access the park through the school grounds was not something that we wanted to see. And I won't be able to support the master plan tonight. So we'll have to vote no on the master plan because I don't believe that the issues that we had have been adequately addressed.
So can I
Yes.
can I respond to that? This is Patricia Farrell. So Dave, we did move the one that's along the creek away from the property line. And the other one that goes at the kind of in the middle there, so we have it kind of stubbed out to the existing water easement that we have there. But obviously that's not an access agreement. And so because this is a 20-year plan, essentially, we felt that it was important to leave that option open as a future potential trail, knowing that we need to negotiate with the school district for that process. So we just felt that rather than not show it and then have to potentially revise the master plan later, sometimes we put things in knowing that there's a process that we have to get through to make them happen. So we just thought just to kind of keep options open and keep the discussion open, that we would show that as a potential point. It's also shown on our transportation system plan as a shared use path coming through there. And so that was the other thing we were trying to reflect, that's shown on one of our existing plans. Now we recognize again that doesn't mean it's going to happen. It just means that it's an idea.
And I should say also that we did describe in more detail the need to negotiate with the school district. So that language, a paragraph has been added discussing specifically the need to coordinate on any trail connection along that edge with the school district and develop a memorandum of understanding or similar easement document.
Right, and our primary concerns are the safety and security of the school during the school day and whenever the school is being used by students. So having public access is a issue that we have to deal with.
So Dave, we did meet with the school district. You were there at that meeting with you and the principal of Judson. We talked to, and the principal did not seem concerned at all about access. I mean, the kids use those access points probably more than anybody, so they're kind of informal at this point. She seemed more concerned about just having people going through the middle of the school, which obviously nobody wants that to happen. So these are kind of very much on the edges. I understand your concerns, though.
Okay.
Dave, is there, I mean, given that there's the paragraph and about language of negotiating with the school and some of these adjustments, what, is there more that you or the school district right now would like to see that is not, like anything specific that has not been incorporated, or is it a larger conversation?
I think we'd have to remove the paved connection to the school district there at the north. So there's no paved connection. That's going to imply that public access is coming across the school ground and to the park at that point.
And you're saying that this is at the north end, so not the one that's the potential trail connector here, is that
He's
correct?
just talking about the potential trail connection. The other trail connection to the north is entirely within the park property and the right of way out to Idlewood. So that trail is completely allowable.
Yeah, I'm talking about the northeast corner of the Judson property. It's about the middle of the park property on that west side.
Oops, sorry, I was trying to zoom. I don't think I can make it do that. Yeah, so you're talking about the little stub that's labeled as potential trail connection.
Correct, yes.
Well, let's open, we can keep this part going, but I want to open it up to other members of the board that might have questions. Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, because I was not familiar with this park at all. I decided, I took my dogs to the park this afternoon, and these are my initial impressions of it, not being familiar with it. One, it's not identified in terms of from access. I mean, I was coming up north on Sunnyside and actually ended up making sort of an illegal left turn into the park because the sign was so small. But as I entered the park, it says, whoa, this is a gem of an area. You know, in the middle of all this development, and you're just off of Sunnyside and Commercial and all that. I says, this is amazing. Felt like you were entering a whole little different world. But my next impression is it felt really old. Everything was just felt dated. And when you started looking at the benches and things like that, and just sort of the regular layout, it just felt, whoa, this definitely needs some updating. But I had the master plan update, you know, on my phone as I'm walking around with the dogs. And again, so this is, you know, again, impressed with the park. I will say that out of all the options that were presented, number 1, 2, and 3, and then this final draft master plan, I would say, you know, from my viewpoint, the draft master plan is the best one out of the 4 that were there. But also, there's certainly some challenges and expense involved in this because it's not flat land. You know, there's sloping and going up and down, which actually gives it some charm. And you know, the natural area up in the northwest corner there is really quite a nice feature, especially when it goes along with the park, with the Pringle Creek. And so that is certainly worthwhile saving. And actually, when you talk about an open classroom, it, you know, it has potential to, you know, talk about environmental issues with the kids, especially with Judson School right there. So anyway, again, that was just my, you know, in my initial sort of blank slate impressions of the park. And, you know, the master plan, I'm kind of impressed with it, improving it, but not overdoing it.
Thank you, Paul. I'm glad you got a chance to get out there. Other questions? Keith.
Yeah, I just got maybe a couple of quick hit items, but thanks, Tracy, for the update. I agree with Paul. I think both on your assessments of the park there. It's been a few months since I've been there, but when I've been to the park, it had very similar feelings that you did there, Paul. So thanks for that assessment. Tracy, thanks for the update. I like the general looks of this plan. In terms of the process, I was just curious, you mentioned the survey numbers. Can you give me a sense of what that compares to in-person, typically what you see for a community park master planning process, what that compares for in-person engagement?
So the most recent park that I did in Salem was Fairview, which is also a community park. That was a few years ago, and that was entirely in person. Now, in that case, you know, the neighborhood that is closest to where that park is going to be didn't exist yet. So that potentially drives down attendance a little bit, but a community park serves such a large area that we still had pretty good turnout. I would say for the public meetings for that, I think we ended up, I can't remember if we had 3 or 4 for that project. And we usually had about 25 to 30 attendees in person. And then survey responses, generally we would have paper surveys in-house at the public meeting, and you would get responses from the majority of those people. And then you would also have an online digital version that people could do. I think we did, or you could download it and mail it back. Boy, I don't remember exactly now, but I think you would get a few more, or you would get comments that would come in digitally, email comments. So I would say that in general, I think we actually got equal to or a little bit higher input than on some of the ones I've done in the past. It varies. I mean, with Minto Brown, I had surveys that had over 1,000 comments. Or, you know, respondents. So that one was a totally different level. But for a community park, I think this was a pretty standard level of engagement.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, it seemed fairly robust. I was just kind of curious how it compared.
Well, one thing that I'll say is, like, you know, the number of views, 300 people viewing or 500 people viewing, that's probably well in excess of what you would normally get, because even though there might be a park website, they don't have access to the same level of materials just looking at the website for the project as they do having the virtual open house. So I do think in that regard, not everyone chose to respond to the survey, but that was a lot of people looking at it and at least getting information about the project. And you have to imagine that if they were passionate about it, they commented.
Right. Well, I guess I'll use this as an opportunity just to make a note that perhaps when we go back to doing in person, we also have a more robust online presence as well to help facilitate some of that engagement outside of the in-person meetings. But other questions, I think you kind of talked about what natural area restoration means, and one of the, and if I could just clarify with that, because I remember when I was out there, there were a lot of trails, and then there were a lot of areas that felt like maybe this is a trail or maybe it's not, not really sure where to walk. So I think what you said is part of that the natural area restoration is kind of redefining those trails, trying to get rid of what are social trails, and doing some vegetation restoration around there. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so, you know, I think the condition varies definitely in different areas along the park, you know, in that area, but like in the area that is east of Pringle Creek, the areas that are kind of a little bit darker green wash, those are the areas that are predominantly natural area. And the majority of those areas is identified in the sensitive area management handbook that was developed for Salem Parks, I think about 2001, about the same time that the master plan for this park was previously addressed. And so, you know, there are in that sensitive area management handbook, they talk about protocols for working and managing the park in those areas. And then I think also as part of that, you know, like there's the idea of managing for the invasive species and managing garbage in these desire line trails. And so the area east of Pringle Creek has quite a robust blackberry population. And then the area west of Pringle Creek, where the majority of the disc golf is, has a very significant ivy presence, and it does have a lot of social trails braiding throughout, up and down the hill and throughout the area. And so the idea would to be for the restoration would be to manage those invasive species, disengage some of those trails, separate them, and, like, you know, get rid of them, and maybe to put up some sort of barrier, you know, and to do some replanting and to put up some sort of low level barriers, maybe not as much as split rail fence, but something along those lines that just helps to denote the trails and keep people off of the reestablishment areas to try and get the native vegetation to establish and grow. Obviously, fighting ivy is a significant battle, but I think the park and that natural area would really benefit from it. And another element that I don't think I mentioned is that the West Fork Pringle Creek has gone through a number of, planning efforts and design ideas. And there is an idea of doing some restoration to the creek as it flows through Pringle or through Woodman C Park. And so that is something that we didn't fully incorporate because we don't know exactly what that would be. We didn't fully incorporate that, but there is mention of it in the master plan report. And we are considering that the main bridge that crosses from the parking lot across to the west side, that would be replaced with a larger, longer span, with the assumption that, there could be some creek restoration, which might involve laying back some of the banks, broadening the floodplain and access for the river to, to the banks and things like that, and some more vegetation restoration. The riparian, there's a fairly decent riparian tree canopy along the creek, but the understory is more impact. So those are some of the things we were thinking as far as the restoration goes. That was a longer answer than you wanted. Sorry.
It was, but I enjoyed it. So thank you. That was, I think that all sounds great and worthwhile effort. My last question was cost, and you alluded to this a little bit. I was looking back at my notes from when we talked about the aquifer storage and recovery planning as well back in November, and I did recall that they had some funding set aside, and I think that's part of the funding that's going to the tennis courts. But I think that was only about half of the funding that they were looking at, about $500,000 is what I have in my notes, if that's still correct. But was just kind of curious if the tennis courts you mentioned is kind of one thing that had been identified through that funding. Was there another target for that $250,000 from the ASR here soon? And so that's kind of one question. The other one was more generally, what is the cost estimate for if we were to say, hey, let's do this plan, get it all done in the next year? What's the price tag on that?
Okay. So the tennis, so I don't know exactly the details of and Patricia or Jennifer, if she's still on, can.
Yeah, I can talk about that if you want.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, so the money for the tennis courts, as you mentioned, Keith, is coming from the ASR project. And so we're waiting to, there was $500,000 set aside for park improvements. And so the tennis courts are the first thing that we'll use that money for. Based on the work that was done at Orchard Heights recently and the amount of, basically rebuilding, almost from scratch these courts. So we're going to get a better estimate from a construction firm that does tennis courts so that we know how much it's really going to cost before we plan for anything else for the money to be allocated to.
Okay. Surely rebuilding tennis courts doesn't cost $500,000 though?
Hopefully not, but there's also the trail, getting to the better access from the parking to the courts.
Okay.
And maybe some regrading to allow for the future field or the basketball court that might also happen then. So there's probably some other, additional costs associated with that.
That would be part of that. All right, that makes $500,000 a little more acceptable to me then.
And I think it also, the current parking budget includes the potential for lighting on the courts, which I think is to be determined at this point, but the lighting for something like tennis courts is not an insignificant budget item. So that contributes. Related to the overall project cost, if you were to build all of this in one shot, we're currently estimating about $6 million,
okay.
Which is actually, I'd say that's on the modest side of the line for what is almost the equivalent of redevelopment, full development of a community park, 30 acres. I think it's not an insignificant chunk of money, but it also is pretty in line with other projects that we've worked on.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Alan, did you have your hand up?
I appreciate it, but Keith asked the exact question that I had.
All right.
Thank you for the answer.
Rick.
Yeah, just a couple comments and a couple questions. First of all, the building another restroom is really, very important to me. I was involved with a group that rented the picnic area, the existing shelter, and I took a lot of grief because there were a lot of people that were fairly old, and to go all the way down to the restroom was quite a ways. So building that restroom there is very important. And I agree with an awful lot of stuff. My kids went to Judson. I even taught a little bit at Judson, and I was involved with Little League and all those fields there. That one, there are a lot of kids. There's a lot of kids that come from that area of the town that go to Judson that really need a good existing pathway to get to schools. I do understand the security of that, and I'm sure that you guys are going to be able to work it out. My questions, if I can remember them, I have to do with, the first one is, when they were doing the tree drop off and they closed down Woodman C for a while, my tennis guys, we were going to Bush Park tennis courts, and they're wonderful tennis courts, absolutely wonderful tennis courts. But they did not have benches on the inside of the courts, benches on inside the fence. I hope that the present court does have that. I hope that will be put into the plan and not be outside the court. But my second question is that in the timeline, let's say everything goes smoothly and everything is approved and you start, what is the timeline in terms of the starting, completion, disruption of normal things that do go on in the park in the meantime?
Oh, that's always the question, Rick.
Yeah.
So what tends to happen is that once we get the master plan adopted, it kind of gets in the queue with all the other park master plans that we're trying to work on. So last month we had Gear Park, which is another community park over on the east side. And there's a proposal to do a skate park there. So, and then we have Fairview still waiting to be developed. And so there's a whole bunch of different parks that are kind of in line for funding. The next one that we're going to try to finish is Bill Regal Park, which is in Southeast Salem, to get that one done, because that's one that's kind of partially done. Like a lot of our parks, we end up just doing in pieces, as Tracy mentioned. And so because there's already features here in Woodman C, we're probably going to take a look at what's the highest priority, which seems to be some trails and maybe some of the restoration for the disc golf groups. So we're going to start piecing it out and seeing which pieces can we do internally with parks operations staff, perhaps, and then look at the tennis courts, obviously, and then kind of start looking at what were some of the other features that people felt were really important to do, which seemed to be maybe some of the loop trails. Restrooms are very expensive, but obviously, as you said, they're very important too. And shelter is always a good thing to add early, because that allows people to gather, and we can also rent them out for funding as well. So probably, we're going to kind of take a look at just some of the pieces of the whole plan.
Okay, thank you. I'm new here, so I ask lots of questions.
No, that's.
But yeah, my feeling is you build it and they'll come. I wasn't a bit surprised that very few people said that they use the tennis courts, and there's a reason for that. I've been very stubborn with my group that we will continue to play there, even though the cracks are so big that a lot of our shots bounce crazy directions when they hit the cracks. But if you build it, they will come. But I will probably ask some, silly questions sometimes, or not sorry, but it looks like it's going to be piecemeal. So the whole thing isn't just shut down and for 6 months, nothing.
No,
Okay, thank you.
no, I mean, the main impacts will be during construction for the ASR. But even then, they're very cognizant of maintaining public access to the maximum. I mean, they might shut things down for a day when they're working on the road or something, but they're well aware that people love this park and they want to use it.
Oh, yeah. And it's a great park. It really is.
And then also just to let you know, Rick, because you're new, is that when we do park master plans, we have liaisons from SPRAB assigned to participate and kind of be the liaison between this larger group and the master plan team. So you can look forward to being on a park master plan in the future.
Okay, thank you.
I had a quick question about the placement of the outdoor classroom, and it just kind of ties into what the questions are, the concerns, I think, from the school district. But I was just surprised that it's a little bit out on its own in terms of not a direct pathway. I would have expected the school to be one of the main users of that, and I'm just curious, like what the vision is for that, of who would use the outdoor classroom and the location of where you put it.
Well, during the concepts, we had a couple of potential locations. We did want it to be associated with the creek. And we had I think the other potential location was on the west side of the creek. For some reason, I don't seem to be able to point. Let me see if I can point. Well, here, if I have a mouse, can you guys see my mouse now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I didn't realize that earlier.
It's very but
The
yeah.
end of the presentation, and I finally got my act together. You would think I could do better. So one of the other locations we looked at was sort of on the bank of the creek under the text right here, which would have been closer to Judson. We didn't get like strong feedback from the school district that they would for sure use it all the time. And we did get a little bit of input from Buttercup, which is over here in the northeast corner, that they would probably gather if there was a gathering space, and that they do come to the park to use the playground specifically. So this is actually fairly close to the playground, and there's kind of a opening in the tree canopy right here, which kind of makes a nice spot for it. So that was kind of the location that we settled on. But, I think one of the things about a master plan too is things evolve. And so it's important to capture all of the potential things that you might, not that you can't do an update in the future, but it's good to capture all of the vision and things that you might want to have. And then it's likely to get implemented in phases. And it's likely that in 15 or 20 years, when it's time to update this master plan again, some of these things may not have ever happened, and others will have. It's, depending on the priorities and the funding and things like that. But I think the outdoor classroom could occur in a couple of different places, depending on, how the rest of the park development plays out. We did think it should be off of a more significant path, which could be captured in either of these locations.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I would just comment too, I was excited to see the community garden on there. I know that implementation of that can be more challenging in terms of who's doing the upkeep, can it be associated with the school, et cetera. But just participating on this climate action plan, the local foods conversations are coming up a lot more. And I know that that's I think a great thing to have built into this, because obviously, as you say, it can scale from where it is now, but just having it as a piece is a really good thing to include.
Right. And that's something that, there's definitely a question of whether or not there's demand today for that, or need. But if there isn't today, there could be in a few years, and it might be warranted at that point.
Exactly. Any other questions from board members? Let's see. Oh, Woody, sorry. My screen only showed.
Okay. Yeah, I had some experience with this park decades ago when I was on the tree crew. I remember climbing those fir trees, pulling that English ivy out of all those trees in that upper west corner. But anyway, I like this layout very much. And my concern is always in all of these is the development and redevelopment of trails through the root zones of the tree canopy. So that's my concern, was related, and not seeing how they actually are doing this, and can't tell. But anyway, I just wanted to get that out there. So
That's a really interesting point, and it is something that we think about when we get to the development stage, but I don't think we have it specifically noted in the master plan, but it could be added. And it's an important, it's great to work in a park that has existing trees and has structure already there, but you don't want to damage those through your process. So that's a good idea.
Dylan, that brought up one more thought that I had, and I don't know if it directly pertains to this master plan, but one of the things I remember from the ASR discussion was also that I think there was a decent number of trees that were going to have to be cut down for that process, and some replantings that were also going to happen. And I don't know that, I feel like I remember other master plans that captured specifically tree plantings, and I don't know if that was is something that should be noted on here, or if that's being captured in another planning document through the ASR system or system planning. But I guess it was just a flag, and I don't know, has that process started, or is that completed? I know it was November when I think we discussed it. But
are you talking about the landscaping around the ASR building specifically, Keith?
I believe I am. I have in my notes that that trees were going to be posted at the end of November for the 30-day notice.
Oh, right. So that at the entrance road to the new ASR building, they had to take out a number of trees along there. And so they will be doing replanting. And Mylan is on the call, I believe, and he's been involved in that process. And then also, I know since the ice storm, a lot of the trees are damaged. Like there's a lot of the cherry trees were damaged at the entrance. And so some of those will be replaced. And we're also showing some additional tree planting along the entrance drive. So the master plan doesn't really get into the specific, too much of the specific locations, but we always look to parks for where we can add trees.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to see where that integration was. Appreciate it.
Any further comments? Nikki.
I just had one. Basically, all my questions have been answered because I was going to ask about the outdoor classroom too. No, I really like the layout of this. It's pretty exciting to see. And I especially like the connector trail from the northwest corner down to Sunnyside. I think that's wonderful when you look at our parks and how we're trying to connect things. I just think this is a really great addition. Nope, I love it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Woody, to your comment, do you feel that we should be approving this, assuming we approve it, with a motion to amend based on your comment of what to include? I know Tracy said they could include some language on the tree aspect, or do you think that that is sufficient?
I think that just being aware of it and is sufficient, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, at a master plan level, we're not getting into the construction details. I mean, it is going to be a matter of kind of wiggling between trees and assessing the trees to make sure that we protect the best ones and the healthiest ones as we develop the trail system. And that can be certainly noted in the report. I don't think it's necessarily something we would put on this plan per se.
Yep.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be specific as much as it has to be this, the concept or whatever of how the approach or how they're going to, your decision-making process for trails.
Wonderful. I'm not hearing any other points of discussion. Is there a motion on whether to adopt the plan?
I'll move that we adopt the Woodman C Park Master Plan update as presented.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Do we have any discussion on the motion at hand? Dave, I don't know if there's any more comments you'd like to make on the motion.
No, I don't need to make any more.
Okay. Just want to make sure you have a chance there. Anyone else like to make any comments on the motion? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. We'll go through Mickey Varney,
Aye.
Alan Alexander,
Aye.
Tony Cato,
Aye.
Woody Dukes,
Aye.
Dave Frydenmaker,
No.
Rick Hartwig,
Aye.
Keith Norris,
Aye.
Paul Rice,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. The motion carries and the plan will be forwarded to council. Thank you so much, Tracy and Patricia, for the great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Patricia, you might want to stay on, I guess, for this next part, just in case for the library strategic plan, just in case there's any more information on that. But hopefully everyone had a chance to review that email, that there is an opportunity to be part of the library strategic planning process. It sounds like it'll be relatively short term and participating virtually. And thank you, Tracy.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
And so it sounds like there's an opportunity for one member of SPRAB, and my understanding is several of us responded with interest. So we wanted to have a conversation of who would like to take on that role and have it as a discussion point. I fully acknowledge that I'm already on the climate action plan, so I am very willing to step aside and let one of you take that role. But I would just love to know, first off, who was interested, or are there any of you that did not have a chance to review that email and have no idea what I'm talking about?
I think Keith was the only other person that I remember seeing an email expressing interest.
Oh, okay. Well, is there
Is
anyone
that true? I don't know. Was there anybody else? Mickey, did you reply? Okay.
Okay. Was there, I know that we also sent out the note that it would be added to the agenda. So is there anyone that had interest at this point? Otherwise, it sounds like we have, Keith could be our choice. Okay, well, that was much easier than I intended or anticipated. I thought there was going to be a couple people here. So if everyone's comfortable with it, I don't even think we need a formal vote unless you do, Patricia, given there's one person. But Keith, I think it'd be great if you want to participate in the library strategic planning. And I know I've been really interested in a lot of some of the library efforts in places like St. Paul and some of the Nature Smart libraries. So I'll probably be sending you some articles and ideas that I've seen. And I encourage everyone else here to send ideas along as well. And Keith, hopefully you can report back next month and the one after as you learn more.
Will do. Thank you all.
Wonderful. Well, let's move into our information reports then. And we'll start out with our Mission Streets Parks Conservancy quarterly update. Hopefully everyone had a chance to review that, but we also have Christine here. And as always, Christine, I want to give you just a minute, a couple of minutes if you want to share any top line items that were or maybe were not in the report by the time you wrote it.
Thank you. It's nice to see you all again. And I always find your meetings interesting and a little bit intimidating given the heaviness or the weight of the agenda, I guess I'll say. Just two things. I'm assuming everybody's read this stuff. So two things of note. One thing that's not in your report, and that is the month of March, we had 423 volunteer hours. In furtherance of our mission to help keep the parks going and in good shape. We had about 30 different people working in the gardens in Bush Park, and including responding to storm damage, which I'm sure you noted. The other item of interest is that we're trying to find somebody to put on contract to work with our volunteers. We're looking for some kind of a volunteer gardener manager person that we're going to pay to manage our volunteers in the park, so that in part to relieve the burden on city staff from always having to answer dumb questions, and also because the people who are really our experts in the park, our plant experts, some of us are getting pretty old, so we're looking to infuse some new blood into that by hiring someone. With that said, I'm completely open to taking questions, and I'd love to hear if anybody has any. Hi, Woody.
Well, I would just say I was excited about the interpret bullet you had on here about doing a program on Oregon white oaks, and just as things like that come up, I encourage you to share that make sure that it's sent to Tony or Jennifer, okay, Patricia, so we can all have an opportunity to participate and share with our own networks.
I'd be glad to. And I think we've got it narrowed, the timing narrowed down to the first half of May. So just heads up, and I'll put you on my list of people to get noticed, or put Tony on my list.
Wonderful.
All right, great. Thanks for your work.
Other questions from members of the board? Alan, were you raising your hand?
No, I didn't. I'm sorry, it wasn't me.
All right. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any, but thank you so much. That was a great report, and I appreciate all of your work.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye.
All right, let's move into our urban forestry update. And once again, thank you, Mylan, for all this work. It was really neat to have the screenshots of the app that you use and to see that in action, have a better understanding of how this works. And I can only imagine the number of dots that were there around the holiday weekend of the storm. And so even this is quite a few dots, but great to see how that system works in real life.
Thanks.
Any immediate question? I guess, Mylan, first, is there anything you wanted to share with us that might not be on the report, or just any key points to highlight?
Yeah, just some feedback about questions you guys had. Keith's about the replanting effort there. I'm not aware of a plan yet that they've come up with or presented for replanting of the trees that have been removed. So that's definitely something for the parks planning and parks operations to follow up on, with where trees are going to go and how many. And then to Woody's point, I was thinking the same thing during that discussion about pulling out the invasives and working in the understory, that we would probably be something I'll be a part of, just making sure that things are done properly and city code is followed as far as protecting trees and making sure that we're protecting any of the healthy trees in that area. So just wanted to point that out.
Wonderful. Any questions from anyone?
Have you been able to get some sleep?
Yeah, we're slowing back down into normal operations. I mean, we still have some contractors working, and our crews are working, and truthfully, we're going to focus the next couple weeks on planting the trees that should already be in the ground. So we got about close to 300 trees to plant over the next couple weeks, and focus on the bare root plantings, which need to get done right away. And we've got a short little window here to get it done. So we'll break off from doing all the hazard work, and the guys will get to plant some trees, and then back to storm work. I imagine it'll take us through the summer to get everything that's remaining, but we've done a pretty good job of taking care of the majority of hazard stuff. So yeah. Sleep, maybe not, but trying to.
I just want to note that I was just staggered. I found this figure staggering, that 18,500 tons of storm debris had been removed. I mean, not just pounds, but tons. That was one of those highlight a few times circles. Just couldn't believe how large that number is. I mean, it makes sense. There's a lot of woody debris in the city, but that is just a lot of work from you and your crew.
Yeah, and that was, that's the stormwater crews and the streets crews and pretty much all the public works and all the 9 contractors that we've had running since February 12th. So yeah, that's a pretty big number. Yeah. That doesn't include all the material that was dropped off by homeowners, which was potentially, a lot of that was city trees as well that went to the Woodman C Park and all the other drop-off sites. So that's a whole nother separate number in of itself.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, thank you so much, Mylan. Appreciate that.
All right, thanks guys. Thanks for all your work.
Let's go into our natural resource planning update. And Patricia, I don't know if you wanted to just share an update on the climate action plan meeting this week, or if you wanted me to, but just to build on, I know this was before the workshop and there's potentially some timetable changes after that. So just curious if you want to share with the board.
Sure. Yeah, we had our 4th meeting of the task force yesterday, and we went over the results of the survey. So I'm just curious as to whether anybody who's on this call on the screen if they took that survey that was the public survey about climate action plan strategies? No? Alan did. Yay, Alan. Nobody else could stand to do it. It was a bit onerous. It was long. But what we did is we took all the strategies that we gathered from the task force members, the consultants, and the public, and we put them all in kind of this system, this survey where you could give it like a red, yellow, green kind of a ranking. And there was over 200 strategies. So it was, and they were broken into different categories. So you didn't have to do the whole survey. You could just go to your favorite topic. If you just wanted to talk about natural resources, or if you wanted to talk about transportation, you could just go to that and look at it and see what the ideas were and see if you liked them. So as with any survey, it's, you know, you get results and they're not necessarily scientific because it's basically based on whoever took the survey. So that was one of the concerns that was expressed yesterday by the task force, is that we're not sure if we got enough response to be able to eliminate any of the ideas. You know, we were hoping to kind of have a more refined, come away from that meeting with a more refined list of strategies, because 200 is a lot to carry forward and to put into a plan, in my opinion. You want to have a plan that you can actually implement, and that doesn't, you know, a whole bunch of actions don't just sit there without any action on them. So there was also concern expressed about that we were trying to do things too fast. Part of the reason was we were trying to stay in sync with our Salem process, with the comprehensive plan update. And so, you know, we're going to take a look at doing more intensive outreach. Hopefully we can get back and do outreach in person again, because a lot of the groups that we want to reach, we don't normally meet with them. We don't know them. So it's much easier if you go in person, and it's a complicated subject as well. So it's just good to meet in person. So we're going to be reaching out to people on the task force to help us connect to their networks. We have a very big task force, and that was part of the reason that we added a lot of people, was because we wanted to reach all these different groups. So we're going to lean on them a little bit to help us with this. And then we're going to reassess where we are with the schedule. So it might get delayed a few months, but I don't think it's going to be I hope it's not going to be another year anyway. What were your, Dylan, I'd be interested to hear your impressions.
Sure. It was very interesting. I did take the survey and I filled out a couple of the sections, and it was a lot. And I know I had some questions in there, so it'll be really interesting to see how we can expand that, especially with potential for some in-person. I guess two things I would underscore. One is that there was just a very big focus on equity, and how especially different thinking about who filled out the survey and who would potentially might not have had access to the survey, and how we could try and address some of those concerns and do some research or some more outreach, especially to BIPOC communities. That was brought up a lot during the meeting. And so I think Patricia had a really good idea to, as you mentioned, lean on the different task force members and have them be the ones facilitating into some of those networks, opposed to us just trying to go to them as a city. And so I think there's some great strategies that emerged. It does seem like it potentially could move back a little bit, but hopefully, you know, with the vaccine rate, I think there could be some potential for some in-person that would make a difference there. My understanding is that there's about 10 strategies that council is going to choose next week, the counselors on the task force, that will then be really analyzed by this Minneapolis firm whose name escapes me. Was it Ecotone? And they're going to do a much deeper dive into the cost benefit of those and the greenhouse gas reduction, some of the socioeconomic factors that would be impacted, the equity analysis, all these different lenses, and present that to the task force. So that's something that'll commence, I think, in the next couple of weeks. Is that timeline still accurate?
It depends on what happens with the meeting with the counselors. If they can make a decision on 10, or if they're going to want to wait a little bit longer. I don't know at this point.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it was a good meeting. I think there was a lot of discussion, and I know that as someone who has hosted a lot of meetings like that, it is always challenging when you come in with a plan and you think we're going to narrow down this list, and then it's like, no, let's push back the timeline. But I think that the engagement and the fact that there was a lot of passion is really good, and hopefully that means that people will be able to take that to their communities, and we can then make a much better climate action plan that's going to be more inclusive and something that everyone can act on together as a result. Paul, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do remember I did do it. The survey, there was such a broad picture, it covered so many big issues. So I gave some input, but I kind of skipped around a little bit. But to me, I guess an important thing is trying to narrow it down, not to the broad plan, but to actual projects that could be done that would make a difference. And that's, it's a little bit like, climate is sort of, I call it the elephant in the room. And there's the old saying that how to eat an elephant, it's one bite at a time. And I think you have to find specific projects that make a difference in trying to take too big a bite. So all you're going to do is get his indigestion.
Well, one of the things that we are moving forward with is looking at all the strategies and pulling out the ones that are the city's responsibility to do, as opposed to other agencies or the state or PGE, and kind of hone in on those, focus in on those, and see which ones are the ones that we need to focus on to get to the goals that City Council established for reducing greenhouse gas. So, a lot of them are nice ideas, but they won't move the needle. And so we really need to, if we want to reach those goals, we need to keep our focus on those ones that will help us reduce greenhouse gas.
Absolutely. So it's a great process. And I think it's really wonderful that we're doing it. And I think the next couple months will be really important for narrowing that down. And I think just the big thing I walked away from was the concern that if we as a task force are narrowing down that list of 200 before more community members have a voice in that, then we're then making the decision for them. So I think that there's some really good opportunities with public outreach. And I just think about these 2 master plans that we've just been presented and the numbers and different strategies we've tried there. So I think there's a lot of good things that can come out of this, and I'm excited to see where it goes next. Any other questions based on the Parks and Natural Resource Planning update that we have?
Patricia, I've been kind of curious the past few times I haven't asked about it yet, and I know we're running late, so I don't want to get too big of a discussion, but I'm curious on the urban beaver strategy and what, and I ask that cautiously, knowing that's sometimes a controversial topic. So that's, like I said, is there a quick update kind of what's involved there?
Yes.
My wildlife background,
I know. I'm surprised you didn't. I kept waiting for you to ask about it, Keith. So we have hired a consultant, Pacific Habitat Services, to help us come up with a strategy of what to do in different situations where beavers are building dams. We've had a great increase in the beaver population in Salem, which is good and bad, depending on your outlook or where the dam is. And so, we're going to be coordinating with ODF&W and working with our stormwater operations and our parks operations staff, and looking at trying to come up with a decision tree, basically, to look at where are areas where beaver could stay and not be a problem, or where do we need to maybe put in one of those pond levelers to keep, so that the dam can stay, but it doesn't keep getting bigger and backing water up. And where are some spots where they need to be removed. So we're kind of, that's where we are right now. We've just started with hiring a consultant.
And I guess, has it been raised as an issue because of people's homes and yards being flooded out, or I guess what's been the causal issue, and how many do we have a sense of how many beavers are in the city?
I don't have a sense of how many beavers are in the city. I know we can track how many complaints about beavers we've received. That's one of the
good index of the population. Yeah.
But yeah, people get very concerned when they see the water, coming up to their yard. getting too close to their building or their outdoor structures, or even blocking culverts, things like that. And then even when if a dam gets blown out by a big flood, all the debris gets washed up somewhere. So, there's kind of issues related to that. And then, of course, cutting down trees. I mean, people have their favorite tree and they come out in the morning and it's gone,
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for Patricia? All right, thank you so much, Patricia. Let's
Thank
move
you.
into our parks operations update. I know we covered a little bit of this with the conversation around unsheltered individuals, but I'll just open it up. Do people have other questions or comments to raise about what was presented? All right, Jennifer, anything else you
So
want
Dylan,
to?
yeah, if I could, I just want to provide a couple just little updates that transpired from when the report was written. One, you'll notice in Mission Street Parks Conservancy quarterly report, as well as my informational report, it talks about the brickwork project, sundial project at Bush's Pasture Park. I wanted to let you know that the Conservancy is going to be going out for a Preserving Oregon grant from the State Historic Preservation Office as part to help facilitate that process with them. We did provide a letter of support for the project, and they're looking at submitting that grant application, I believe on April 12th or around there. So I don't know if Christine's still on the line, but I know it was referenced in her informational report and mine, but that's a little update that's transpired since those reports were both done. And then the second thing, it was referenced obviously when a question came up when Gretchen Bennett was doing her presentation relative to the unsheltered population and the topic relative to safety. I wanted to follow up as well and share with you that from a park safety standpoint, we've discussed previously, I've relayed self-defense kind of training in our effort to kind of provide a myriad of different trainings for our park staff. Last week, I brought in from Employee Assistant Program, EAP, to have on-site sessions with all of our parks staff. They were 1-hour sessions. And really the context of those was to help provide our staff with some stress management tools and some guidance as they're kind of working through not just those specific instances that are occurring, but kind of the daily grind of kind of dealing with this situation for now, well over a year. So, and we also wanted to provide proper opportunity for folks who maybe were reluctant to seek services or had some kind of barriers that did not allow them to seek services in their off time, to be able to do that during work time and on site. And that for some, I know that they shared with us that they used it as an opportunity to initiate some follow-up services with some of those clinicians. So we're really pleased with the outcome of that. And I wanted to share with you that those efforts that we brought in. And then the next training that we're working with and hope to have in place within the next week or two to hold again with all of our park staff is situational awareness training. We have issues where staff are certainly trying to maintain different aspects of the park, and with so much going on, especially in those parks with the heavy population of unsheltered individuals, that there's concern that they can't kind of see all the way around them and things that they should be looking for to help provide some security and safety for them. So we're going to be bringing someone in to provide training relative to that topic area. And that's all I have.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that update. And just one more thing that you and I know you emailed me about today and with Patricia, as well as the birding tour. And for those that had RSVP, oh, we lost Mickey. Hold on, let's let her back into the room. Mickey, can you hear us now? Oh, might still be connecting. I'm not seeing anything on Mickey's video. Is anyone else? Okay. Uh-oh. Well, hopefully she can rejoin us here in a moment, but So she's joining now. Come back. Mickey was one of the people who responded to the survey. So I was hoping to say it while she was here, but we can move while Mickey is rejoining. Let's just go into Becky's update. Becky, anything verbal that you wanted to share on top of your report?
No, I don't think so. I mentioned at the very end of the event information of my report for recreation about the Ironman triathlons, and I think I mentioned it briefly last time. So I don't know if anybody heard, but on last Friday it was released worldwide that they were going to be offering a triathlon here in Salem in July. And I just want to reassure everybody that this has been completely vetted through the leadership team, city manager, EOC, fire department, staff, legal, all of the above. And the idea is that I think the date is it's a Sunday, July 25th. And they are looking forward to doing the event if COVID guidelines allow, and if the Ironman organization provides a suitable safety plan outlining all of the things that they're going to do to make sure to show precautions for the event and for all the safety of even the visitors and things of that nature. So I just kind of wanted to let you know that because I Friday morning, I immediately started getting a bunch of emails. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows that that is being vetted through the appropriate process.
Thank you for that. Mickey, can you hear us now? It looks like you're back in. Oh, still cannot
It's not
hear you.
showing that she has audio hooked up.
Good point.
There's no mic next to her name.
You're right. Well,
She's
hopefully
showing up on the participant log.
Yeah, hopefully you can hear us, Mickey. I think we're almost at the end, but if you'd like to try calling in, or if you want to message one of us directly, if you have any thoughts or comments, I encourage you to do so. Two things I just wanted to note on that. One was about the birding tour. For those of you that were interested with the park ranger, it looked like Friday, May 7th is the time that worked for 4 out of 5 of the respondents on the survey. So we can follow up with everyone that filled out that survey. It was a Friday morning. And so we can send that out and make sure that there have not been any schedule changes that mean that is no longer a good time. And then the other thing I was just going to plant a seed for, I guess, Becky, Jennifer, and Patricia, is just it'd be wonderful if this summer, if, pending COVID restrictions, if we could do some kind of board outing, park tour or something. I know there's been a variety of things in the past, and I'd love to just have that in the back of your minds as we think about different activities and hopefully the ability to meet again. Any other comments or questions for Becky before we move into an opportunity for any new business? Okay, any new business? I know we're running a little long here tonight, but it was great with the master plan and talking about the unsheltered individual update as well. Okay, hearing none. Our next meeting is May 13th, and I hope everyone has a wonderful month between now and then. And please reach out if there's anything else. But once again, Rick, it's great to have you on board and look forward to meeting you in person and hopefully the not too distant future. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Night, everybody.
So.
See ya.